Eve Carson was born on November 19, 1985, in Athens, Georgia, a place filled with old trees and southern charm. From the beginning, she stood out. Teachers described her as brilliant, yet humble. Friends remembered her as the one who always stayed late to help, the one who smiled through stress, the one who somehow made kindness look effortless. By high school, Eve's name was already known. She was vice president of the student council, a volunteer at a nursing home, a helper at a teen shelter, and even a congressional page. It seemed like she was everywhere at once, doing more, helping more, being more. She graduated with honors and attended the University of North Carolina at Chapel Hill, double majoring in political science and biology. Eve didn't just study, she led. She volunteered abroad, taught science to kids, and worked with doctors in Ecuador. Her professors said she was the kind of student you never forget. She was 22 and already changing the world. No one knew that her story, so full of promise, would soon take a turn so dark it would haunt a nation. It was March 5, 2008. Eve's house on Friendly Lane glowed softly from the inside. Her roommates were heading out to a party and invited her to come. Eve smiled and declined. Exams were coming, and she wanted to study. She promised to join them next time. Around 1:30 a.m., her friends left. The night was quiet, cool, unremarkable, the kind of night that felt safe. By the time they returned around 4:30, everything had changed. The front door was open, lights still on, Eve's car gone, and Eve, nowhere to be found. At first, her friends thought maybe she'd gone for a late errand. But as hours passed and calls went unanswered, panic replaced logic. When police arrived later that morning, they already had grim news. A woman's body had been found less than a mile away. No ID. No phone. Just silence and the sound of sirens in the early dawn. The body was found near a quiet intersection in Chapel Hill, a young woman, shot multiple times. She was alone under the faint orange glow of a streetlight. Detectives couldn't yet name her, but by sunrise, one of Eve's friends arrived at the station to identify the photo. The scream that followed said everything. It was Eve. Police traced her last known moments. Her computer had been active until 3:30 a.m., meaning she was still home hours after her friends left. Somewhere between then and dawn, she was forced from her house, taken into her own car, and driven into the night. Her wallet and credit cards were gone. Her phone, lost somewhere near a highway tower. When news spread across the UNC campus, the air itself seemed to change. The campus that had always felt safe was now shaken, haunted by one question that echoed in every hallway. Who could do this to Eve Carson? Detectives worked through the night, retracing Eve's steps minute by minute. Her car, a blue Toyota Highlander, was missing, but by noon, a traffic camera downtown captured something. Eve's vehicle at an ATM. The timestamp read 3:55 a.m. In the grainy footage, two men sat inside. Eve was nowhere in sight. Moments later, one of her debit cards was used. From those frames, detectives pulled their first real clue: two young faces barely visible under hoodies. They weren't hardened criminals, they looked like local kids. But appearances meant nothing now. Police released the photos, and soon, tips flooded in. A name began to surface again and again: Dario Atwater, and another, Lawrence Lovett. Both had prior records, both known to law enforcement. Still, few could imagine they'd harm someone like Eve. But evidence was building fast: ATM footage, phone pings, and a chilling trail of withdrawals that traced her final hours. By March 7th, Chapel Hill was under a blanket of grief. Students held vigils across campus, candles flickering beneath Eve's smiling photos. Professors wept openly in hallways. The whole town, once defined by safety and trust, felt smaller, colder. Police now knew Eve had been kidnapped from her driveway, forced to withdraw money, and driven to a quiet street near a wooded area. That's where they shot her, once in the arm, once in the face. Her car was later abandoned, her killers vanishing into the night. But in their rush to flee, they'd made a mistake. One of Eve's cards was used at another ATM, this time with a clearer image. The man pressing the buttons was Lovett. His hand, his jacket, his face, unmistakable. Within hours, warrants were issued. The manhunt began. A tip came in from Durham. Someone had seen Lovett bragging days earlier about hitting a jackpot. Another said Atwater was hiding in an apartment complex nearby. SWAT teams moved in quietly at dawn. Within minutes, both suspects were in custody. When news broke, relief washed over the campus, but it was hollow. Justice didn't erase the ache. Students gathered on the steps of the administration building, leaving flowers and handwritten letters that began with the same words, "We love you, Eve." As detectives questioned the suspects, the story grew darker. They hadn't planned to target her specifically. She was in the wrong place at the wrong time, a random act of cruelty that stole a life filled with light. But the evidence was undeniable. Fingerprints, surveillance, and confessions connected them to every moment of that night. The case that began in mystery was unraveling at last, but the answers brought no comfort, only heartbreak. The courtroom was packed, students, reporters, families. As the prosecution laid out the evidence, a heavy silence filled the air. The ATM footage, the gun residue, the stolen cards, it was all there. Dario Atwater and Lawrence Lovett sat expressionless, avoiding the eyes of Eve's parents seated in the front row. When the photos of the crime scene appeared on the screen, you could hear people sob. The prosecutor's voice trembled as she spoke of Eve's final moments, her calm, her fear, her dignity even in the face of horror. The defense argued youth and poor choices. But to the jury, the cruelty was too deliberate, the violence too senseless. Eve's family didn't seek revenge. They sought truth and peace. Still, every word cut deep. Every image was a reminder of what the world had lost. In December 2008, Dario Atwater accepted a plea deal, life in prison without parole. A year later, Lawrence Lovett was found guilty of first-degree murder and kidnapping. He too was sentenced to life without parole. For the first time in months, Chapel Hill breathed again. But closure is never simple. Outside the courthouse, Eve's friends hugged through tears. Reporters spoke of justice served, but her parents stood quietly, knowing no verdict could fill the empty chair at their family table. Lovett showed no emotion as the sentence was read. The judge's final words echoed, "You took a life that gave nothing but love." The courtroom stood still, the weight of loss and justice mingling in the same breath. After her death, UNC became a place transformed. Students painted murals, built scholarships, and planted gardens in her name. Every spring, the Eve Carson Scholarship was awarded to students who embodied her spirit, leadership, compassion, and light. Her friends spoke of her as if she were still there, walking across campus, barefoot with her books, always smiling. Professors kept her photo on their desks. Chapel Hill itself became a living memorial. The same streets she walked now marked by flowers, prayers, and a quiet promise that she would never be forgotten. Even years later, when new students arrived, they learned her name before they learned the map of the campus. Eve had become more than a victim. She was a symbol of what goodness can look like, and what can be lost when evil crosses its path. Time has passed, but Eve's story still echoes. Her friends have gone on to teach, lead, and serve, many inspired by her example. Her family continues to speak of forgiveness, not vengeance. They remind the world that remembering Eve isn't about how she died, but how she lived. In every speech given in her honor, one theme repeats: light. Eve carried light into every room, every friendship, every cause. Her death was cruel, but her life, her kindness, her passion, remains untouched. When the sun sets over Chapel Hill, students still pause at the small memorial near Polk Place. They read her name, whisper a prayer, and walk on, carrying a bit of that light with them. And somewhere, in the quiet of the night, it feels as if Eve is still there, smiling, guiding, reminding the world that goodness, even in tragedy, never really fades. Eve Carson's story isn't just about tragedy. It's about the brilliance of a life that continues to inspire long after it was taken. She was a friend, a leader, a light in her community. And though her time here was short, the impact she made has outlived the darkness that tried to silence her. As we remember her tonight, may we hold tighter to kindness, to compassion, and to the people who make this world a little better, just like Eve did. If stories like this move you, if you believe that every victim deserves to be remembered not just for how they died, but for how they lived, then help us keep their light alive. Subscribe, share, and join this growing community of voices determined to tell their stories with truth and respect. Because every time we remember their names, we make sure their light never fades.